Hello, I'm going to read for you today a book called Pippi Longstockings by Astrid Lindgren, illustrated by Lauren Child. Chapter 1. Pippi moves into Villavicula. On the outskirts of a tiny little town was a neglected garden. In the garden stood an old house, and in that house lived Pippi Longstocking. She was 9 years old, and she lived there all alone. She had no mother or father, which was actually quite nice because it meant that no one could tell her that she had to go to bed just when she was having most fun. And no one could make her take cod liver oil when she would rather eat sweets. Once upon a time, Pippi did have a father whom she loved very much. And of course, she once had a mother too. But that was so long ago that she couldn't remember at all. Her mother died when Pippi was a tiny little baby, lying on her cot and crying so terribly that no one could stand to come near. Pippi thought that her mother was now up in heaven peering down at her daughter through a hole. Pippi would often wave to her and say, "Don't worry, I can always look after myself." But Pippi had not forgotten her father. He was a sea captain who sailed the great seas, and Pippi had sailed with him on a ship until one day a big storm blew him overboard and he disappeared. But Pippi was sure that one day he would come back. She didn't believe that he had drowned. She believed that he had washed ashore on an island that was inhabited by natives and that her father had become king of them all. He walked around wearing a gold crown on his head all day long. "My mama is an angel and my papa is king of the natives. Not all the children have such fine parents, let me tell you," Pippi used to say with delight. "And as soon as my papa builds himself a ship, he will come back to get me, and then I will be a native princess. Yuppie! What fun will that be?" Many years ago, her father had bought the old house that stood in a garden. He had planned to live there with Pippi when he grew old and was no longer able to sail the seas. Then unfortunately, he was blown overboard. While Pippi was waiting for him to come back, she headed straight home to Villavicula. That was what the house was called. It stood there all furnished and ready, just waiting for her to arrive. One beautiful summer evening, she said goodbye to all the sailors on her father's ship. They were very fond of Pippi, and Pippi was very fond of them. "Goodbye, boys," said Pippi, kissing each of them on the forehead, one after the other. "Don't worry about me. I can always look after myself." Two things she took from the ship: a little monkey, whose name was Mr. Nelson. He was a present from her father, and a big suitcase full of gold coins. The sailors stood at the railings with their eyes fixed on Pippi for as long as they could see her. She walked firmly away without looking back. Mr. Nelson sat on her shoulder and she carried the suitcase in one hand. "What an amazing child," said one of the sailors, and he wiped a tear from his eye as Pippi disappeared in the distance. He was right. Pippi was a quiet, amazing child. The most amazing thing about her was that she was so strong. She was so incredibly strong that there wasn't a policeman in the whole wide world who was as strong as she was. She could lift the whole horse as she wanted to, and she did. She had her own horse that she had bought with one of her many gold coins in the very same day that she arrived at Villa Villicula. She had always longed to have her own horse. He now lived in a porch, wherever Pippi wanted to have her afternoon coffee there. Next to Villa Villicula was another garden with another house. In that house lived a father and a mother with their two sweet children, a boy and a girl. The boy's name was Tommy and the girl's name was Annika. They were two very nice, well-mannered and obedient children. Tommy never bit his fingernails and he always did whatever his mother asked him to do. Annika never made a fuss if she wasn't allowed to have her own way, and she always looked so dainty in her crispy ironed little cotton dress, which she was careful not to get dirty. Tommy and Annika played very nicely together in their garden, but they had often wished for a playmate. While Pippi was sailing the seas with her father, they would sometimes lean over the fence and say to each other, "It is so sad that no one had ever moved into that house. Someone should live there, someone with children." On that beautiful summer evening, when Pippi stepped through the front door of Villa Villicula for the very first time, Tommy and Annika were not at home. They had gone to visit their grandmother for a week. It's why they had no idea that someone had moved into the house next door. On the first day after they came home, when they were standing in the front gate and looking out in the street, they still didn't know that the playmate was actually so close. As they stood there wondering what to do and whether anything fun was going to happen that day, or whether it was going to be one of those boring days when they couldn't think of anything to do, just at that moment the gate of Villa Villicula opened and a little girl came out. She was the strangest girl that Tommy and Annika had ever seen. It was Pippi Longstocking, going out for her morning walk. This was what she looked like. Her hair was the color of a carrot, and it was plaited into two tight plaits that stick straight out. Her nose was the shape of a very small potato, and it was completely covered with freckles. Under her nose was an exceptionally wide mouth with a nice white teeth. Her dress was quite odd. Pippi had made it herself. It was supposed to have been blue, but there hadn't been enough blue material, so Pippi had decided to sew little red patches here and there. On her long, thin legs, she wore long stockings, one of them brown and the other one black. And she wore black shoes that were exactly twice the length of her feet. Her father had bought these shoes for her in South America, big enough so she would have room to grow in them, but Pippi never wanted any others. What made Tommy and Annika really open their eyes wide was the monkey who was sitting on a strange girl's shoulder. It was a little African monkey, and he was dressed in blue trousers, a yellow jacket, and a white straw hat. Pippi set off up the street. She walked with one foot on the pavement and the other one in a gutter. Tommy and Annika fixed their eyes on her for as long as they could see her. After a while, she came back. Now she was walking backwards. That was so she didn't have to turn around when she came home. As she reached the gate to Tommy and Annika's house, she stopped. The children looked at each other in silence. Finally, Tommy said, "Why are you walking backwards?" "Why was I walking backwards?" said Pippi. "Don't we live in a free country? Can't a person walk any way she likes? Besides, I can tell you that in Egypt everyone walks like that, and nobody thinks there is anything odd about that." "How do you know that?" said Tommy. "You've never been to Egypt, have you?" "Have I been to Egypt? Oh yes, you can bet that I have. I've been everywhere on the whole planet, and I've seen things that are much odder than people walking backwards. I wonder what you would have said if I walked on my hands, like people do in the furthest India." "Now you're lying," said Tommy. Pippi thought for a moment. "Yes, you're right. I was lying," she said sadly. "It's bad to lie," said Annika, who finally opened her mouth. "Yes, it is very bad to lie," said Pippi, sounding even sadder. "But sometimes I forget, you see. And how can you really expect a little girl whose mama is an angel and whose papa is the king of the natives? A girl who has sailed the seas all her life? How can you expect her always to tell the truth? And besides," she said, her whole freckled face beaming, "let me tell you that in the Congo there isn't a single person who tells the truth. They tell lies all day long. They start at 7 o'clock in the morning and keep on going until the sunset. So, if I happen to lie once in a while, you'll have to try to forgive me and remember that it's just because I've spent a little too much time in the Congo. But we can still be friends, can we?" "Of course," said Tommy, and he suddenly thought that this was probably not going to be one of those boring kind of days. Let me introduce you to the author, Astrid Lindgren. Astrid Lindgren was born in 1907. In the early 40s, she created stories about free-spirited, red-haired character of Pippi Longstocking to entertain her own daughter who was ill with pneumonia. Pippi Longstocking was published in Sweden in 1945 and was an instant success with the children. Astrid Lindgren once commented about her book, "I write to amuse the child within me, and I can only hope that the other children may have some fun in that way too." After the publication of Pippi Longstocking, Astrid went to spend a lifetime writing for children. Her books have sold over 145 million copies worldwide in some 91 languages. During her lifetime, Astrid Lindgren was awarded dozens of Swedish and international prizes.